Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here with School Transportation News, and we are live here at STN EXPO. Well, this podcast was recorded live at least, and it's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. And I'm here with a special guest. You guys might have read the July issue. We have an Innovator of the Year. It's inaugural. If you haven't read it, you might want to open up your issue to find out who our special guest is, but his name is Alex Cook with First Student. He's here with me today. Alex, welcome.
Greetings, sir. Thank you, and I appreciate this. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah, so nice. Yeah, we learned a lot about Alex. He has come to STN EXPO. I convinced him. I twisted his arm, and he's been soaking up the Green Bus Summit and everything we're doing at the show. And, you know, I just want to kick it off. Like, what were some of your big takeaways? It's your first time at STN EXPO. What were your thoughts?
I tell you that the diverse audience has been very humbling for me, and sitting through a lot of the seminars and hearing some of the issues that the people are combating from a wide range of various expertises really drove home to me just how complex of a situation we're in here with advancing this new technology. And I think the more that we, as an industry, can help and assist each other in this journey is huge and key for all of us to be successful.
Excellent. So for those of you who might not know, Alex is the chief engineer at First Student. And it's like, a chief engineer, what are you building? Rockets over there? What's happening, Alex? So talk to me, how does one become a chief engineer? What does that look like?
Well, it's a whole lot of experience, actually. You know, in my case, a little over 34 years. And I'm an engineer from Purdue. And, you know, having spent almost 20 years with Cummins Engine Company and then having transitioned to Greyhound Lines and then into First companies, you know, where I'm at right now, I've got responsibility for First Student, First Transit, and First Vehicle Services, which is a wider range of different applications, which, you know, when you talk about similarities and when we introduce new technologies and the crossover between all of those companies and how do we leverage and bring best practices from one to another, you know, not only relying on the experience that we've accumulated, if you will, plus the educational experience that, you know, I've personally gained over those years. It's a really great environment and it's a family atmosphere. And so we are really embracing these new technologies. And, you know, the team, for myself, being the chief engineer for the corporation, I'm surrounded by a whole lot of really good, talented engineers that are very passionate about this space as I am. And I think that shows with all of our folks that are on the ground and really pushing this forward.
Excellent. And yeah, Alex and I know each other too, because one of a former friend of mine, Robert Josan at Cummins, I saw him standing next to you one day and I was like, Robert, I thought you were retired. And there he is, one of your new lieutenants, I guess, helping to be part of this kind of movement to electrification. And also James Johnson, who I knew as well from IMMI, who was working at First Student. So this industry is so funny because I feel like everybody knows everybody.
Absolutely.
Maybe I'm aging myself maybe now. Maybe I've been around too long. I know too many people, but yeah, it was great to see familiar faces. Can you kind of unpack a little bit what First Student is doing in the area of alternative energy? I know we've tapped you a few times to speak on panels and have these kind of broader discussions. For our audience that maybe doesn't know you or isn't familiar with First Student's kind of scope and what you're taking on, which really drove you to win this Innovator of the Year award from STN, is you're just like, it's a really heavy lift what you're doing. So can you kind of unpack that a little bit for the audience?
Boy, that's a big one, Tony. Yes, there are multiple facets of alternative fueling / energy that we are in. So if you look at the historic model of diesel, which is the go-to in ICE, and then how that's transgressed over time into be it CNG, LP, gasoline, and if we weigh not only EPA mandates against CARB mandates and then, you know, the additional states that follow CARB, for example, which, you know, they're kind of on the front end of introducing some of the more stringent, if you will, emissions regulations, which then bubbles down into the alternative fueling realm. And if you look at our embracing of all of those new technologies, we've really strived to do a good analysis of what those technologies are. How can we help introduce and bring those technologies to the marketplace? Because it's really all about, at the end of the day, reducing the carbon footprint and our journey to destination zero. And so based on the impact of greenhouse gases, the carbon footprint, for every gallon of diesel that you burn, you emit 22.2 pounds of CO into the atmosphere. We're very cognizant of that, and we really strive to keep track of what our carbon footprint is and what are our plans currently and in the future to continue to drive that down to destination zero. All of those various technologies, and the latest one obviously being electrification of school buses, clearly for our ability to make an impact for future generations, to leave them a better place, we need to introduce, embrace, and deploy this technology as fast as we can. As we see what's happening right now, as a matter of fact, on the news this morning, there's record heat in the UK. I think there's 1,000 fatalities already associated, for example, the heat over there in Spain and some of those European countries. If we look here in the US, the temperature continues to rise. There's a propensity there that a lot of that is a direct function of global warming. And, whether or not you prescribe to that theory or not, the way that we look at it is that, look, we need to do our corporate social responsible piece of that to continue to drive that down. And so, we make sure that we try and stay agnostic to those various technology providers, because we want to be able to look at it and evaluate each one for a given customer, a given application, and what makes the best sense for that environment which we're introducing that technology, be it gasoline, be it LP, be it electric, so forth and so on, that we delight the customer. We make the biggest impact to the environment that we can, being cognizant of the surroundings, and we deploy it as fast as we can.
What are we talking in terms of units? Like, what's deployed now in terms of EV technology in your fleet, and what's kind of the volume we're talking about? Just give me a sense of that.
Oh boy, the old proverbial saying, drinking from a fire hose, we're there. And if you look at currently right now, as I sit here and we have this conversation, we have 34 projects in play right now for just the electrified space. We're currently interconnecting with 20 utilities. So that's a host of, whether it's unidirectional or bidirectional or even V2B or microgrids, we're playing in all those spaces. And if you look at what the future holds from a standpoint of electrification, sometime here in the next, I'll say 18 to 24 months, we're going to be interconnected with basically 139 utilities across 39 states with the electrified product. Now, from a standpoint of sheer numbers, we currently have the largest global deployment of battery electric bus going on as we speak, and that's up in Quebec, in Canada, and that's with 300 units, of which we have 120, I believe, last time I looked, the data was Friday. I think it's 127 units that are on the ground running every day, and then we're on our journey to the next balance of the 300 for that. If you look at around the rest of the states, we've got a multitude of various ones throughout various states, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic, because as we consult with our customers and we put forth a plan on how we're going to electrify a given location, we kind of use, I'll call it the terminology, a crawl, walk, run. And that crawl phase is that we deploy smaller amounts of units. And that, I'm going to say that's anywhere from between 1 and 10. And those are demonstration units. Those are units that we validate with along in conjunction with the customer to make sure that the vehicle is going to meet the duty cycles and the operational requirements and all of that. And when we install that infrastructure for the crawl phase, we're always looking forward to the future, to future-proof, because we're talking about a lot of capital being invested for the infrastructure, either ahead of the meter or behind the meter. And so while you're there doing these installs, keeping a mind to the future on how can I, while I'm here, advantage ourselves and our customers to future-proof the location so that when we move from the crawl phase to the walk phase to the run phase, and the run phase being the end game, which is electrification of a total site, that we can do that with a very easy transition with everything that we've put in on the front end during the crawl phase. So if you look at just sheer quantities across the nation and North America, between our operational companies right now, Student Transit, we've got somewhere around 500-ish operating in its totality. And I think we're taking in right now, I believe it's 9 EVs a week. If you look at the hopper moving forward back to those 34 current projects, you're talking several hundreds of buses in deployment across North America, all the way from, the great state of Washington to California to Oregon to down in the South, all over the Northeast, multiple places up in Canada. So our footprint is really giving us a whole lot of coverage in the entire North American realm, Canada and USA. I know that was a long-winded answer. My apologies, my friend.
No worries. Let's kind of bring it down to like a school district level and say, okay, I'm a school district. I'm considering electrification. What's kind of the best advice? Like, don't do it? Or is it like, what are those steps, like working with the partners, kind of giving people kind of the blueprint if they're really considering this, since you've obviously walked the path?
Absolutely. It's a very complicated answer. It's a multifaceted step, and it is a journey. It all starts with basically doing a fleet analysis. So for a given school district, if they have a desire to electrify, because we know back to it's a very capital intensive proposition to electrify, not only on the bus side of things, but as well as on the infrastructure side of things. You need to take a look at, obviously, the fleet, how many vehicles in that fleet, as we heard that was discussed by the EPA yesterday in one of the forums, how many vehicles are candidates potentially to be swapped out for an EV. Based on what those are, then looking at the duty cycle of those, how far do they have to run? What's the environment they have to run in? How much time do you have to charge to complete that duty cycle? That's another facet of it. Getting help around how do you spec the equipment? How do you model exactly what you need to do? Because we're in a different realm today with electrified than what we were with ICE. Range means everything, right? There's a phenomenon out there called range anxiety. Range anxiety is I'm worried about completing my trip. That's where on the front end you have to do a really good job of understanding the equipment. What are you wanting to do with the equipment? Do you have the right battery size? Do you have the right charger size? Does it all match up with the dwell time that you're going to charge the bus in?
But how do you know? I mean, if I'm a novice, right? Like how do you choose? Who do you go to? What's the resources? Like, I think a lot of people are very challenged sometimes when you look at those. It's almost overwhelming because, right? Like if I'm a transportation director, I'm trying to operationally move the kids to school, to and from safely, do it in a timely fashion. And now there's this big burden being put on me to have to change my fleet. And right, people don't love change. And this is like cataclysmic change, right? Like, I mean, the way it's moving. And I think, there's a lot of momentum and talk about it. And, I mean, what is that best piece of advice for someone that's looking for maybe a resource to do what you're explaining to do?
There's one of two ways. I'm an advocate of knowledge is power. Education, education, education. We as an industry have a lot of resource around the various facets of what I was talking to from a standpoint of a chronological kind of a step-by-step on what you have to do. There's a lot of resources that we have with our peers, be it OEMs, be it peers like us to other school districts that you can rely on, that if you want to educate yourself on how do you do it, what are the key facets you need to look at, that's one way of doing it. A second way of doing it is that we have a lot of really good, talented people in this industry that have services to help a school district do this. So they can do fleet analysis, they can do design from a standpoint of infrastructure ahead of and behind the meter, they can help spec the equipment. From our standpoint at First Student, one of the benefits that we have is that we are vertically integrated. Now, what that means is that we do everything from the fleet analysis to the speccing of all the equipment, to the sizing of the batteries, to the sizing of the chargers. And that's all derived off of real empirical data that we've run in field tests out in the field. And so we're in the process ourselves, because we've had so many phone calls from our peers in industry about exactly what you're asking. How do I do this? Where do I start? And so we're kicking off a consultation arm of FIRST, if you will, to help our customers through that. Even if they don't do business with us, and let us do their transportation, we're there to help them through the journey. We're one of several entities that are in this industry to help. So it comes down to a personal decision on behalf of whoever's running transportation or the school district entities that are in charge of making this happen. They either educate themselves on how to do it and ask a lot of questions, get a lot of reference material, and educate yourself on how to make it happen, or get some help to make it happen.
Got it. Yeah, I know Kevin Matthews
Yes.
from First Student, who is in charge of that program on the sales side, as well as Esperanza Perez from EPA, I think it's Region 9. They had a session kind of breaking that down for our audience here at Green Bus Summit at STN EXPO. And I know the audience reacted well because,
Yes.
there were a lot of conversations that were spurred from that. And, one of the big things that I've noticed, and I was talking to one attendee about it, is they have their sustainability manager here at STN EXPO.
Yes.
They have someone who's looking at infrastructure analysis. So it's totally a new set of attendees we're starting to see come to the show, I think, as a result of Green Bus Summit, because the content is very aligned with where the direction is of a lot of districts that are kind of making that jump or leap into this EV world. Now, propane still exists too, right? And we're
Yes.
seeing, where is the use case for that? And so there's a lot of discussion on where's the best fit. And I had one attendee that I talked to, and they said, hey, the electric power went out at my yard. I couldn't even open the gate to get the buses out of the yard. What happens when I show up and the buses aren't charged in the morning? Like, there's fear. Like, I don't trust that this is going to be viable, because they get scared and gun shy and like, hey, it happens once. It gives you anxiety, I think, as a transportation professional. And when you've got 5 buses or 10 buses, okay, maybe manage. But when you've got 500 buses,
Different story.
or 50,000 buses,
Absolutely.
right? That's a monumental task to try to manage and try to maintain expectations of your parents. They love electric until they don't show up on time, right? So, and they don't want to hear any of the excuse. They just want it to work, right? It's kind of like a phone. You just want it to
Absolutely.
work. You don't care how it's made.
I will say one thing on that point right there, that when we're talking about resilience against either, be it, catastrophic events that would cause a brownout or a blackout, and our ability to function, we've had a lot of success working with the utilities that when we do the design of the head of the meter infrastructure, that there are ways to better drive resiliency from, for example, parallel feeds. So we know that there's multiple substations that are strategically placed throughout a given grid. And in a lot of instances, there are multiple feeds that can be brought to a location, okay, to support the electrification. So you can have, one substation feed coming in, another substation feed coming in, so that if for whatever reason one is dropped, you still have a backup one. So that's one bit of advice.
Great advice. Never really thought of that. Makes a lot of sense.
Number 2, there is a lot of advancements in standby generation, right? And so you've got your historical, standby diesel generators. There's also some new technology that is really moving strongly across the space that is a much lower carbon emission standby generation. And it uses natural gas, but it doesn't combust the natural gas. Okay. There's been several deployments of this in the state of California. And so when we start to look at keeping, quote, that same theme from a standpoint of low carbon emissions, there's now some standby generation that you can go after. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, look, we've got a lot of electrical horsepower in those batteries, right? And so, when we're talking about, for example, V2B and assisting a school district, or in the case of a natural disaster, being able to use those vehicles as standby generation to maybe power more critical things, be it a hospital, be it the school itself, so the children can continue to go to class, or how do we redivert some of the power out of what's in some of the fleet batteries to other buses and have full charges on those batteries so they can continue to run. I think there's a multitude of things that you can do to drive resilience in from an electrical standpoint to really continue to maintain the operation.
And the software too, right? So isn't there software on these chargers? If there is fall off, you'll get maybe a push notification. I guess it depends what technology you invest in, but definitely having that kind of peace of mind with the technology and the software is helpful.
Well, and in a lot of cases, I will call that forewarning that there's something impending. So you're right. There are multiple software suites that can be applied to chargers. You can start out with just what I guess we call a dumb charger, which is basically you plug it in, it starts charging, you unplug it when the bus is done.
I don't think the charger's listening, so don't worry if we call him that,
perfect. Okay? Then you get into this smart charge realm, right? And the smart charge realm it brings a whole lot more capability and flexibility to the charging. So whether it's time of day that I want to do charging based on a given tariff from a said utility, it's interactive. There's dashboards with it, so you can pull up your fleet real time. How many buses do I have plugged in? What's the state of charge of my various buses? Additionally, you can have that linked in a multitude of ways. You can have it actually beamed directly to a cell phone through a text. Hey, bus number 14 out there on charger 32, it just dropped offline and it wasn't at a full 100% state of charge. Sends a warning out. Another means is that it'll do, depending on which one you pick potentially or how you trim the system, it'll send emails out. And so, if you have a total loss of power at a facility, whoever is the recipient of that information, now all of a sudden I see, okay, I've got 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 buses that are letting me know for some oddball reason the charge has stopped. So that now means I've got some warning that in the morning I may be in peril of not being able to run the service. So it gives you a little bit of extra time on how do you accommodate that? What do you do? Contact the school. We've had an issue here. How far out is the power? Is the school still going to operate? But the amount of horsepower that's in what you talk about being the software and the ability to smart charge, the ability to manage the energy in either unidirectional or bidirectional, because that's another huge topic on when we're tying buses to utilities for bidirectional to help load shave or help the utilities in those times of peak demand with what we have left over in the batteries for the common good of everybody in the community to put that power out there. That's another whole entire facet of those software suites of, look, it's got a whole communications piece, it's got a whole dashboard piece, it's got a whole unidirectional smart charge piece, and then it's got a bidirectional piece. And the bidirectional piece can go to what, a lot of people say in the industry is V to X, whether it's vehicle to building, vehicle to grid, vehicle to standby. There's a whole litany of applications. And it's really exciting what we can do, Tony. It really is. And, when I have these conversations based on where we're at here on the front end, we are only limited by our imagination here. Okay? We're seeing an industry that's basically had relatively small change for the last 40, 50 years. And we're doing more change in the next 18 to 24 months than what we've done in the last 40 years. Yes, there are some teething pains. Yes, it's frightening, right? But we're in this together and it's exciting and we really are only limited by our imagination.
I love it. Such a great conversation. So you get the word, you won the STN NSTA Innovator of the Year Award. Did you get some phone calls when the magazine hit the streets? What was the reaction?
Absolutely. Probably the biggest one is that people want to know what it is. And so we've spent a lot of time, and look, there are multiple entities that have picked up our design, okay? And that's what it's all about. It's being a good custodian to the environment of which we're in and to our peers in the industry. And so there's been a lot of conversation. What does it look like? What do you mean by it's standard off the shelf, componentry? How does that help me? The fact that, we're not doing any trenching, everything's above grade. I can have everything on a flatbed semi built off site. It all trucks in with a fork truck and a couple of electricians. I can electrify a site with 100 buses in basically 36 hours. Those kinds of things are unheard of because of historical construction practices with bricks and mortar and pouring pads and all this other stuff. The ability to be flexible, make it as cost effective as we can, how we share that with our peers, a lot of the members of STN, how do we share those best practices? How do we advance this thing to where we get larger numbers out there in shorter periods? That's what it's all about.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to officially presenting you your award at the upcoming National School Transportation Association meeting that's coming up in Buffalo or Niagara Falls. So it'll be great to see you there and present you the award formally, since the original vision was to kind of combine efforts with NSTA to recognize innovative folks, specifically contractors. And I'm really excited to do that and see you out there, and we'll formalize it all. But the word's out, the cat's out of the bag. Really excited that you're here. They get a lot out of STN Expo, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Tony, it's been a true pleasure, my friend, and I can't thank you and your efforts and the organization for what they do for our industry. It's truly a model, and you guys provide a service that's just key to everybody, because I look at you as the glue that binds us all together. And this is a long journey we're going to take. And there's power in numbers. And as we learn from each other, we will all ascend to a much better place. And I look forward to seeing you, and I appreciate the consideration of the award. I look at it as it's an award for not only my team, who's worked really hard, but it's an award for us all, because that technology, based on what we've brought to light that's available to everybody, it's a win for everyone. It's not just for us.
Yeah, you guys want to learn more, check out our July issue of STN. It's on the website, stnonline.com. You can click on magazine, read all about Alex, the Innovation Award, all the details about the projects he's working on. Really great stuff. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Hey, guys, if you've been attending the STN trade show this summer, you'll likely be bumping into our experts at TransFinder. We love them. We love having them at STN Expo. They've been crisscrossing the country, summer show season, and TransFinder's been sharing everything they have new. They're on a mission to let you know about safety and savings that they can create for your district or contractor business. In Route Finder Plus, you get the tools as well as Form Finder, Chat Finder. Find out about that trifecta with the Route Finder Plus, the browser-based solution, Wayfinder, their innovative driver app, the Stop Finder. It's, leading edge parent app. This is must have, guys. Make sure email them getplus@transfinder.com or call 800-373-3609. Hey, again, special thanks to Alex Cook, first student, our special guest, our Innovation Award winner, and our friends at TransFinder for sponsoring and riding with us on this podcast since its inception. We appreciate you guys. Hey, visit stnonline.com for all the latest and everything happening in the school transportation industry. Check out all the coverage on STN Expo on the website too. We've got tons of that. Social media, share it with your friends. stnpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to pods, guys, we're there for you. And also want to shout out our winners of our Green Fleet Awards at Green Bus Summit. We had Kenny Jean Schrader over at Three Rivers Community Schools in Michigan. We had Salt Lake City. We had Ken Martinez accept the award there. Our medium public fleet, Daniel Weekly, the Executive Director of Operations, Kansas City Public Schools in Missouri. Also our large district, LA Unified, Daniel Kang. He's the Deputy Director of Transportation, as well as private fleet category. We had Ron Halley, VP of Fleet at Student Transportation America, accept the award. So we honored them. You can learn more about that story as well on the website. Guys, we love you. We'll see you next week.